Hello friends, welcome to UPSC CSE. Let's crack it in English. So today we'll be discussing Indo-Myanmar relations. Before that, briefly about me. So I'm Siddhi Bangard, 3 years of teaching experience and graduated from BIT Mesra, appeared for civil services, both means and interviews, and graduated from XLRI Jamshedpur with MBA in HR. Good morning everybody, good morning and glad to see you here. Hope you enjoy the class. Today's class is extremely interesting because Indo-Myanmar is something which is least talked about, and yet Myanmar is an extremely important neighboring country that we have. It's our gateway to Southeast Asia, and we'll see how. And there'll be some interesting facts that we'll be talking about today. So hold on to your seats, and it'll be an exciting journey today. All right. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Extremely good morning. And I'm glad all of you are here and we'll have an amazing class today. All right, folks, before that, at Unacademy, you have daily life classes. All my students, a lot of my students are already attending my prelims mock test series, which is going on right now. The entire schedule is on my Telegram channel and on my Unacademy page. So you can follow me on Unacademy and come to my classes. You're most welcome to come to the prelims mock test series classes. We also have live test and quizzes, and I will also share all the PDF notes with you for my test series. And other than that, if you are at Unacademy, you get access to all those PDF notes yourself. We have all our courses aligned with the UPSC syllabus so that nothing is missed out of your preparation. And one subscription of Unacademy, for instance, you take it for my classes, you get access to all the wonderful other classes that we have on our platform. So with that, I would also like you to introduce you to all the top educators that we have on our platform. All of them are extremely talented and have been teaching for a while now. Some have decades of experience in teaching, like Mrunal. And we are covering all the courses for UPSC CSE, right from prelims to the interviews. We have course for everything so that you don't have to run around. We do all the hard work. We become your mentors and you can just focus on preparing well for the examination. And a 1-year subscription at Unacademy, the fee is around 40,000, less than 40,000 if you use my code SBUS, and it is a no cost EMI available on our 6-month, 12-month and 24-month subscription. And a 2-year course which is beneficial especially for UPSC 2021 students will cost you less than 58,000 if you use my code SBUS, so that your yearly cost comes down to less than 29,000. So it's far lesser than the 40,000 that we discussed. So friends, let's proceed today. India IR series, India and its Eastern Neighbours part 4. And why am I doing it? Because I am in Eastern Neighbours. I'm covering all our neighbours which have a boundary with us. So today we'll be covering India-Myanmar. What is the sequence? How are we actually going to go about it? So the sequence is, we'll first discuss briefly about what Myanmar is all about. We'll actually demystify Myanmar. Then we'll actually go and discuss importance of Myanmar. Why is that? It's a neighbor, so obviously geography cannot be changed. But what is the strategic importance of Myanmar to India? Because if we understand this, we will be able to understand why we need to study it in detail and why is India doing what it is doing with Myanmar. Because you will be surprised to know that our policies with Myanmar are very different when it comes to our rest of the neighbors. So all of you must be aware that Myanmar is actually being run. Myanmar was being run by a military junta, and still India, even after being a democratic country, was very friendly towards Myanmar. So why was that? And why was we were not discouraging Myanmar like the rest of the world? Why was that happening? So we'll discuss all of that. Good morning, everybody. The third thing we'll discuss is history of Myanmar, because it is important to understand what was the political and other history of Myanmar to actually understand in which context India and Myanmar have actually engaged. Then we will discuss history of relationships, India-Nepal relationships with Myanmar. And after the history, we will actually discuss the areas of cooperation between India and Myanmar, and areas of concern between India and Myanmar. You'll be surprised to know we actually don't have any disputes with Myanmar. And finally, we will discuss the way forward in our relations with Myanmar. Why do we want to discuss a way forward in our relations with Myanmar? Because we are still trying to make inroads into the Himalayan nestled country. We are still trying to make inroads into a country that is landlocked on three sides, but still is of very, very high strategic importance to Southeast Asia and to South Asia and to the ocean routes that pass from the south of it. So we'll study all of that, and why is India not being able to make as much inroads into a Southeast Asian neighbor as China has. What are the irritants? Why is it so important to actually make inroads there? So we'll discuss all of that. All right. With that, I hope you enjoy the ride. And in the next session, we'll be discussing about Indo-Bhutan relations. All right, folks. India, as we know, I have already discussed this numerous times, so I'm going to skip this slide. And India, its eastern neighbors. So briefly, very briefly about Nepal. As you can see, here I have put all the countries which are immediate neighbors of India in the South Asian region or Southeast Asian region. So Bangladesh, Bhutan, China, Myanmar, Nepal and Sri Lanka all lie to the east of India and all share boundaries with India, either in the form of a maritime boundary like Sri Lanka, which we've already discussed, or land boundaries, for example, Nepal, Myanmar, China, Bhutan, Bangladesh. We have already discussed China, we have already discussed Nepal, we have already discussed Sri Lanka. Today we'll be discussing Myanmar. Now, Myanmar shares a hopping 1700 kilometers boundary with India. In fact, I will also show you the map that where does this actually 1700 boundary goes. So it actually shares a very, very large boundary with 4 Indian northeastern states. So it has access to the area of India to which even India does not have proper access to, and that is why Myanmar is extremely important for us. The entire border with Myanmar is actually guarded by Assam Rifles and the Indian Army at various places. Again, population of Myanmar is very less compared to India, but compared to what fears our other neighboring countries have of India, Myanmar actually sees India as a very friendly nation. Though the irritant between Myanmar and India is that India is not able to deliver on what it promises, and Myanmar has always been confused about India's dilly-dallying policies. In fact, when I talk about Myanmar today, I will also be comparing what similarities we have in dealing with our neighbors when it comes to Myanmar, and what dissimilarities do we have when it comes to our dealing with Myanmar with the rest of the Indian neighbors. It has a nominal GDP of just about $66 billion, though let me tell you, this eastern state is extremely rich in natural resources, and had a very, very glorious past. But as the world has it, most of our neighbors, the similarity as it has with most of our neighbors, be it China, be it Nepal, be it Sri Lanka, or be it Bangladesh, or in fact even India, they have faced a humongous civil war within their nation. So you can actually cross out India from that. We didn't have a civil war, but there was a period in the time of our history when we were actually dealing with a lot of coalition governments, so there was a lot of political instability, but no civil war, so correction on that. But all these countries, be it Bangladesh, be it China, be it Nepal and Sri Lanka, or Myanmar, they have been dealing under civil war conditions for quite some time. And Myanmar also had that condition for somewhere around 20 years of their lifetime, which actually pulled the country back. And that's why, even though this country is so rich in natural resources, so rich in human resources and otherwise, this country has fallen back on its capitalizing on its GDP through the use of its natural resources or to develop adequately. And as you can see, it lies almost closer to Nepal in its human development indices and is very low on the HDI index. Its parliament is called the Assembly of the Union. Now, there is an interesting fact here. Myanmar is actually a country which has been sanctioned by the world, especially the Western world, for its human rights issues and for its Rohingya genocide. Now, Myanmar does not want to call it a genocide. We'll discuss why. And why it is a genocide, we will discuss that also. But as of now, this is a country which was first isolated by the generals or by the military that was ruling it. And later on, it was isolated because of the Rohingya issue, which became a very, very sensitive issue with the Western and the Islamic world. As you are already aware, that America is very close to the Islamic world when it comes to trade. So that issue, the Rohingya issue, has been vehemently raised by the Islamic world, and the genocide has been condemned world over, and that has actually resulted into Myanmar and China coming closer. So India is also trying to make inroads and trying to ignore the Rohingya issue, but that has led to some backlash on India's democratic credentials also. So we'll discuss all that political gamut which is happening in and around Myanmar as of now. Sorry, Shubham, Rohingyas are from Myanmar only. I'll discuss in detail about them, so don't worry, we'll discuss everything. Alright folks, let's go and look at the map of India. Here you can see Myanmar is here, but I will show you this in detail because as of now from this map, it's very difficult to actually gauge how this entire thing is looking. So we'll discuss that a little bit more in detail. And Myanmar also shares a maritime boundary with India. So not just Myanmar shares a political or a land boundary with India, but also a maritime boundary with India. We do not have any disputes with Myanmar, rather we are developing port projects in Myanmar. But if we don't have disputes, we do have some serious concerns regarding Myanmar, and we'll discuss that. So if you can see the map here, the thing is, alright, Myanmar comes somewhere here. This is Myanmar. Now look at closely the position of Myanmar. I hope that the map is clearly visible to everybody. Is it? Is the map very clearly visible to everyone? Is the map clearly visible to everybody? Shubham, I'll answer all your queries. Don't worry. When we'll go to Rohingyas, I'll answer all your queries. Right now, just focus on what I'm teaching. Alright? Okay. So, this is Myanmar here. Alright? It looks like somebody has raised their one finger like this. This is the shape of Myanmar. Right? Now, if you see closely, Nepal is here. Alright? Bangladesh here. Bhutan here. And this is our entire northeast. This place which I have highlighted in black is our entire northeast, and Myanmar shares a boundary here. So the strategic importance of Myanmar is that it can access our far northeastern states of Mizoram, Manipur, Nagaland, which normally it is very difficult for India to go to. So we have only two routes left with us actually. Either to use Bangladesh to go to that place like this, or to go to Myanmar and then access our farther northeastern states. So that's the first strategic importance of Myanmar. What is the second one? The second strategic importance of Myanmar is, look at this nation here. Till Bangladesh and Bhutan, what we have is the Indian subcontinent or the South Asia. So what are the nations which are there in South Asia? Pakistan, India, Nepal, Bhutan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka and the Maldives here. These are South Asian nations. Myanmar is the first country in Southeast Asia. China is also part of Southeast Asia. But if we are able to access Myanmar, we are actually able to access the entire Southeast Asia. And that is why Myanmar is kind of a land bridge and also a sea bridge between South Asia and Southeast Asia. So if India has access to Myanmar, it can access rest of the Southeast Asia. And why is Southeast Asia very important? Because of first, India's Look East policy, India's Act East policy, and more importantly, since India wants to implement both its Look East and Act East policy, it is important for India to engage with ASEAN to actually give a proper and concrete shape to the Act East policy. So basically, in one line, if we want to talk about Indo-Myanmar relations, then it would be Myanmar is a bridge between our neighborhood first policy and Act East policy. So you can actually use this line whenever you want to write any answers about this. This will actually be important for the mains examination because very recently in January 2020, China and Myanmar have signed almost 32 memorandum of understandings for various projects that China wants to carry out in Myanmar, and that has actually raised a lot of concerns in New Delhi. So you can easily begin your answers by writing that the strategic importance of Myanmar is that it is a bridge between our neighborhood first policy and our Act East policy, which the current government is trying to follow. We do go from Sikkim, Shubham, but if you see, your question is very relevant. Yes, we do try to access our northeastern states through Sikkim, but this is a very small region. It's also called the chicken neck. So if, and it has actually happened, if this highway that goes to the northeast, if it gets blocked, then the entire mainland is cut from the northeastern states, and that's why we need to have more ways to actually access our northeast. So that's the first region. And the second reason that we have to actually access the northeast via Bangladesh or via Myanmar is that the distance that we have to travel to northeast or to access northeast actually significantly reduces. For example, if you want to access Tripura from Kolkata, it is easier to go through Bangladesh and then access Tripura rather than going through the chicken neck and then accessing Tripura. So that's the benefit of actually having good relations with Bangladesh or Myanmar or accessing our northeast through Bangladesh and Myanmar. Hope I've answered your questions. Yes, it is not the first importance of Myanmar, Sivranjani, but it is the fact, it is the entire summary of our relationships with India-Myanmar. That it is a bridge between our neighborhood first policy and Act East policy, right? Is that clear? Okay. Now let's come to Myanmar as we know. There'll be some really interesting facts. In fact, even while I was reading it, I was so intrigued by this country. Now let's look at it. This is the state emblem of Myanmar. And as you can see, they have actually put in the geographic structure of Myanmar here. So it's the state emblem of Myanmar. This is all written in Burmese language. Now, there was no partition done. The thing is, Shubham, it's a part of history. So we really can't change that geography. All we can do is we can access our geography in a better manner. Good morning, Pubali. Now, let's come to the economy part of Myanmar. So, Myanmar is extremely rich in jade and gems. Jade is a green colored material. It's an important semi-precious stone. It's extremely rich in oil and natural gas and other minerals. In fact, there is a very funny fart joke that I'll be sharing with you as we progress, that why India is actually behaving so nicely with Myanmar, because it has huge oil and gas reserves, especially the gas reserves are very huge, especially at the Sittwe port that we are developing with Myanmar, on the eastern side of Myanmar that we are developing. So that port is extremely rich in gas, and India and China both being very energy hungry countries, we are trying to have as good relations with Myanmar as we can so that we can access its natural resources. This country has one of the highest solar energy potentials in the Southeast Asian countries, and it is also a very extremely rich source of timber. In fact, the reason British wanted to actually acquire Myanmar, or why Myanmar actually became a British colony, is twofold. First, British didn't want Myanmar to fall into the hands of the French, just like what happened with Nepal. Or what happened with Sri Lanka. So Sri Lanka, British had a fear that Dutch might end up giving, or Dutch might end up losing Sri Lanka to the French. Similarly, British had a fear that Burma might actually end up going into French's hands during the British-French wars that were going on in 1880s. So that's why British decided to acquire Myanmar completely, so that French do not have access to it. Otherwise, British would be having an enemy in their immediate neighborhood. So the British idea was to actually acquire the entire Indian subcontinent. So there was no challenge to its authority anywhere, right? And that was the reason they actually went on acquiring Myanmar. Not as of now. Sivranjani, they are actually trying to develop a lot of things, but they haven't actually been able to come up with it. There are a lot of plans. Though China has an oil and gas pipeline with Myanmar, which they are actually using. So China has that, we don't have it yet. In fact, we are not even able to build roads in there. So forget about the pipeline as of now. Okay, let's come to that next. Okay, British got access to Myanmar after 3 Anglo-Burmese wars were fought. So before British actually came in, Burma was being ruled by a lot of other kingdoms. And finally, after the 3rd Anglo-Burmese wars that happened in 1885, Burma became a colony of British, and at that point of time it was attached to British India. It is only in 1937 that Burma was separated from India and made a separate colony. The name Burma got changed to Myanmar in 1989 when a second coup d'etat happened in Myanmar. That means the second time the military came to rule in Myanmar. The first time was in 1962, and when the second time the military actually came to rule in Myanmar, they actually renamed it from Burma to Myanmar. And still, you will be surprised to know an interesting fact about Myanmar. The name, whether it should be Myanmar or it should be called Burma, is still a dispute within Myanmar. So what it should be called internationally, whether it should be called Burma or it should be called Myanmar, is still not clear. They are still fighting over it. And why is Burma called Burma? Because the Bamar ethnic community occupies some 70 to 70% population of Burma, and that's why Burma is named after the Bamar ethnic community. It has a parliament and it has a bicameral legislature as of now, after Aung San Suu Kyi was released, and Burma had general elections, or Myanmar had general elections in 2015. Myanmar has a parliament and has a bicameral legislature. It has a presidential form of government, semi-presidential you can say. So there is an executive president. However, 25% of legislators or central legislators are still nominated by the army. So the army hasn't completely relinquished control in Myanmar, but the amount of influence it used to has actually significantly reduced down to only 25%. And you will be surprised to know, even though Aung San Suu Kyi, who's a very famous leader from Myanmar, she is still not able to become the president because she has married a foreigner and her children are foreigners. So she has been deliberately barred from becoming the president and now acts as a state councillor, which is akin to a prime minister. So she has executive powers. Good morning, everybody. I hope I'm clear till now. Are there any doubts that you guys have? Anything that you want to ask? Then I'll take a pause. Please let me know. All right. Socially, it has ancient ties with India. So just like Nepal, just like Sri Lanka, Myanmar was also our very well-known neighbor. So we have ancient ties with India. And in fact, the Theravada Buddhism, Myanmar follows Theravada Buddhism, which is one of the branches of Buddhism. And it came off in the first or second council, Buddhist council that happened in India. So Theravada Buddhism is the common state religion there. And the Burmese script is actually taken from the Granth script of India. The Granth script is what is from where the modern Malayalam language comes from. So the Granth script is responsible for a lot of languages that we know which come from Kerala or Tamil Nadu. Alright, so the Burmese script is actually taken from the Tamil script. And obviously Burma is, what mention of Burma is complete without talking about the Indian National Army that was formed by Subhash Chandra Bose in 1944, where he gave his famous slogan, "Tum mujhe khoon do, main tumhe azadi dunga." You give me blood and I give you freedom. So definitely Burma has that kind of relationships with India. Let's talk about its geography. Yes, there was a specific reason for the change in the name. So they were actually, the military junta wanted to make its rule clear. That was one of the reasons they actually changed the name. And Burma community also wanted to show its ethnic majority there. So that was two reasons why the name was changed from Burma to Myanmar. All right. And the second is, Sujan, I will be talking in detail about the Rohingya issue. I will not be leaving out anything. But before we go to actually discuss the Rohingya issue or any of the concerns, so we'll be moving history-wise, chronologically wise. We'll first discuss about the past, and then by the end of the session, we will actually come to the present issues that we have with Myanmar, because unless you study the past, you will not be able to know what is the exact problem. So we'll discuss everything in detail, as I've talked about in detail. All right, let's come to this. Southeast Asia, the geography, Myanmar, as I already talked about it. Southeast Asia, so Myanmar lies in Southeast Asia. The area of Myanmar is very, very small, almost 0.7 million square kilometers, so extremely small compared to India, which is 3.28 square kilometers, million square kilometers. It has Bangladesh and India to its northwest, as we already saw. I'll just show you once again. So it has bordering with Bangladesh here. All right. And it is bordered by India, definitely in the northwest. It has borders with China, very long borders with China, and in fact, very good trade relations also. Somewhere to the tune of $15 billion trade is actually happening along these borders. It has borders with Laos, all right, and Malaysia and Thailand. So in fact, you'll be surprised to know that a major investor in Myanmar is actually not China. The major investor in Myanmar is actually Thailand. Myanmar has been one of the founder nations in a lot of international organizations. So though this country has been repeatedly banned from international organizations or has been excluded from any international happenings because of its military rule, it has been a founder in the non-aligned movement. It has been admitted to the ASEAN. It is a member of the East Asia Summit or ASEAN Plus 6, as we have already talked about ASEAN Plus 6 in lecture 2 and 3. So I'm not detailing it out here. And it's a renowned member of BIMSTEC. In fact, Myanmar was the only second Southeast Asian nation that was invited to the swearing-in ceremony of our Prime Minister Modi. What was the other Southeast Asian nation that was invited as a part of BIMSTEC? That was Thailand. So Thailand at that point of time was going under a lot of political turmoil, as we already know. There were some issues regarding the election of the Prime Minister and the President. There was a huge tussle going on between the royals and the public. So Thailand could only send a special envoy, but Myanmar was adequately represented at the swearing-in ceremony of Prime Minister Modi in 2019. You will be surprised to know that unlike all the other neighbors of India, which was at some point of time colony of the British, Myanmar decided not to be a part of the Commonwealth. It decided to completely relinquish its relationships with United Kingdom. Though United Kingdom still remains heavily invested in Myanmar for all the oil and gas that we have already discussed. All right. Okay. Fine. Let's go to importance of Myanmar. As I already told you, India and Myanmar share a long border, and the four Indian states with which it shares borders is Mizoram, Manipur, Nagaland and Arunachal Pradesh. Now, with three of these states, Mizoram, Manipur and Nagaland, we have border crossing points with Myanmar where a lot of trade actually happens. However, the trade is only reduced to, or the trade is only limited to $2 billion as of now. As of the latest data from 2018-19, The border trade that happens between India and Myanmar is just limited to $2 billion compared to $10 billion or $15 billion that happens with China. However, a lot of projects, for example, the Kaladan multimodal project that we are having with Myanmar is actually for providing better access to Mizoram through Kolkata. So from Kolkata, we actually go to Myanmar first, and then from Myanmar, we are trying to access Mizoram through the Kaladan multimodal project. It actually reduces the amount of distance we have to travel by 1000 kilometers to reach Mizoram. So if you start from Kolkata, instead of reaching Mizoram in 2-3 days or 3 or 4 days, the time significantly reduces to 1 or 2 days. So that's the beauty of India and Myanmar relationship. So it's important for actually accessing our northeast. It is India's gateway to Southeast Asia, as I've already talked. Myanmar is also a gateway for Northeast to ASEAN. So if you want to develop your northeastern frontier, it is important that they develop economically. How will they develop economically? When they have more trade. So how will they have more trade? If they get access to ASEAN. And that's why we are trying to develop our northeast so that it can have extended trade with ASEAN. So not only the mainland benefits, but also if there is a lot of trade incoming and outgoing from northeast, the entire region will develop, and the insurgency that we face in most of the northeast, that actually comes down. So Myanmar is not only our trade partner, it is not only our way to trade, it is also our partner in the insurgency which I just mentioned. So Myanmar and India and Myanmar recently got together for Operation Sunshine 1 and Operation Sunshine 2 in the Indo-Myanmar border regions to actually cull out the terrorist activities in that region, so that the northeastern region, which has been so far dealing with insurgency, that insurgency can be reduced. So India-Myanmar border is highly porous and poorly guarded and located on a remote, underdeveloped, insurgency-prone region. And that's why only if we have good relationships with Myanmar, we can curb insurgency that is coming from their side or the terrorists which might enter to us from Myanmar. In fact, we are doing what we have done with Bangladesh in Myanmar. So we have friendly relationships with Bangladesh, and Bangladesh actually helped us out in culling out the Alpha or United Liberation Front of Assam. So we are taking Myanmar's help in culling out similar insurgencies in the areas of Manipur, Nagaland, Mizoram and Arunachal Pradesh. Also, this border is very vulnerable to activities of insurgents, drugs and arms traffickers. So whenever you leave a border unmonitored, be it with Bangladesh, be it with Nepal or be it with Myanmar, it becomes a storehouse, it becomes a powerhouse of drugs and arms traffickers and human trafficking also. So the Nepal-India border is known for human trafficking, and so is the Nepal-Bangladesh border. In fact, interestingly, this is something that just not happens only with India and its neighbors. It also happens with USA and Mexico. And that is why, there was a famous meme about Trump also, that he wanted to build a wall across its border with Mexico, because a lot of drug dealers and armed dealers enter USA through the borders of Mexico. So whenever you have undefined borders, or whenever the polity of another neighboring nation is not doing well, the problems of drug traffickers, armed traffickers or human traffickers become very, very common, because their economy is not doing well. So what do you end up doing? You end up having illegal businesses of all sorts, and that creates a problem in the already stable nation. For example, India here, and for example, USA there. Human trafficking is you actually get in people to be either sexually abused or to work as bonded labor, but mostly you actually import women from the other country who are sexually abused in the current nation where they are imported. So that's about human trafficking. You can go and Google more about it. Abdul, if you actually want to discuss Sri Lankan Tamilan issue, right, you can please go and look at the other lectures. I am not discussing any of the contentious issues here, because this class is meant to enlighten you more on international relations with respect to UPSC. So it's not a debate and discussion class. You can actually go and watch Aapki Adalat and maybe ask answers there. All right. Yes, women and children, mostly females, are trafficked. All right. Now, we also have a very, very important security issue with Myanmar when it comes to the influx of sizable number of Rohingya Muslims who are coming from Myanmar's Rakhine state. So these Rohingya Muslims are actually coming into India as refugees. India has actually denied to give them a refugee status, and it says that they are illegal migrants. Now, why we are doing that and why we are not doing that, I'll discuss at great lengths, because who are actually Rohingya people and why this dispute is entire happening. And it's a very sad state of affairs that Rohingya is the most persecuted minority in the entire world. So we'll talk a lot about that. Most importantly, India-Myanmar border actually poses a serious threat to India's security, and that is one of the very important reasons that why we want to engage more with Myanmar, so that at least our northeastern borders are secure, because there's already a lot of disturbance. And if further security issues happen in our northeastern borders, as I showed you here, if there is further disturbance along this border, then our entire northeast gets affected, and if there is an insurgency in northeast, it will become very difficult for India to control, because there is very limited access, as you can see, through the Chicken Neck corridor through Sikkim to these northeastern countries. So it will become extremely difficult for India to control insurgency here, and it might lead to separatism, and India does not want that at this point of time, at least, or in future also. Okay, let's come to next. Shubham, can you please stop debating on that issue? We'll discuss everything, all right? We'll discuss everything, all right? Okay. Let's come to the ethnic groups in Myanmar. So I have put here a detailed political map on how Myanmar is actually divided, all right? There is a Kachin state, and I will just mention a few important states and why they are important. Kachin, Chin, Rakhine, all right? This is from where the Rohingya belongs. The Rohingya Muslims actually belong. They are mostly from the Rakhine state. Yangon is here, and then there is this state called Kain Shan. So these important states which I have listed out here are actually ethnic hotbeds of civil war within Myanmar. The Shan state, the Kachin state, the Chin, the Rakhine, the Mon, the Kain, they are very hotbeds of civil war within Myanmar, and they actually keep causing a lot of political stability within Myanmar. So that's why I've mentioned them here. And why did I mention the Rakhine state? Because if you can see, here is the Sittwe port. This is the port that India is developing. It is very close to the Krauke port that China is developing. So we are developing a port here with respect to what Chinese have already done. Now let's look at the ethnic groups in Myanmar. So Bamar is the majority. Then comes the Shan people. Then comes the Karen people, Rakhine people, Mon people. So all these major ethnic communities keep fighting with each other within Myanmar. Let's come to Myanmar's history in brief. Abdul, I'm not here to get into a debate with you. This is a class where all my other students are also there. So would you mind if I please continue? All right? Because there are a lot of important sections that I still need to discuss. If you have issues, if you wanted to discuss it further, you are free to go and discuss with anybody you want. All right? I'm not taking up that issue here. Thank you. All right. So how it happened in Myanmar, how it came to be known a British colony, and then finally it became the state of Myanmar, and then how the relationships with the rest of the world have actually progressed. So let's throw some light on that. We are not talking about ancient Myanmar here. We'll talk from the late 19th century to the 1950s, till the time Myanmar actually got independence, and then we'll separately discuss what happened post Myanmar actually got independence. So, okay. The first Anglo-Burmese war happened in 1824 to 1826. The second one happened between 1852 and 53. And by the time the third Anglo-Burmese war happened, Burma actually lost its complete independence, and British gained complete control over Burma. So who were fighting this war with Burma? It was the Konbong dynasty, or the Konbong kings, who were fighting these Burmese wars. And as you see the timeline, so the time or the amount of time the war actually was there between the British and the Burmese people actually kept on decreasing. So each time the victory was easier for the English. For example, the first war was fought for 2 years, the second was only fought for 1 year, and the last one within a month or within 1 or 2 months, the British people were actually able to gain control, complete control over Burma. So bit by bit, they actually completely accessed the entire Myanmarese country, and they were able to gain control of complete Myanmar and make it into a British colony. However, in 1937, British decided to actually separate the Burmese colony and made it a separate colony, separately administered colony of Great Britain. And Burma became the first premier or prime minister of Burma then. What happened in 1940s? I'm quickly not talking about in general what happened in between. There were a lot of rebellions that were raised. For example, the Uwa rebellion, which was actually, sorry, not the Uwa rebellion, but there were a lot of other rebellions that were raised for the Burmese, so that they wanted independence, but nothing much happened. It was only when Japan started gaining control of the Indo-Burma region that British were woken up, and finally when in the Second World War, Japan lost and the Second World War ended, and the world, the decolonization was happening all around the world. That's when the Burmese actually also gained their independence along with Sri Lanka. India got it a little bit earlier. So once the British lost their hold on India, obviously they lost their hold on the other colonies that they were holding in the neighborhood of India, because the reason why they were holding all the other neighborhood countries as colonies was simply because they wanted to preserve their crown jewel India from any of the foreign occupation. So in 1940, Japan actually formally entered the Second World War, and Aung San, so like what happened with Subhash Chandra Bose, he formed INA in the Indo-Burmese region, which was actually also depicted in the movie Rangoon, starred by Kangana Ranaut and Shahid Kapoor and Saif Ali Khan. At that point of time, Aung San, who is the father of Aung San Suu Kyi, also formed Burma Independence Army in Japan. So both of these things were going on together. So he was just like Subhash Chandra Bose, he also formed an army there to liberate Burma from British occupation. Burma was devastated during the World War II, as what happened with a lot of countries, because a lot of Burmese soldiers participated and a lot of them died. Japanese troops advanced in Rangoon and British administration completely collapsed, and that's why a lot of Burmese people actually lost their lives, because Burmese people were fighting from the side of British. Yes, he's also called the father of Myanmarese nation. You're right, Shubham. Yes, it was a part of India. It's a part of British India. Myanmar has a very separate religious and cultural history than the rest of the Indian subcontinent. So it's not a part of Indian subcontinent per se, but it was a part of the British colony for a brief time. That is how it is. All right? Okay. Now guys, let's come to the next one. Following the World War II and the collapse of the British administration, Aung San, or the father of the modern Myanmarese nation, he negotiated a Panglong agreement. What was this agreement about? Let's go to the previous map. Here you can see there are a lot of ethnic states here. They represent a lot of ethnic communities. So the Panglong agreement was about getting all these ethnic leaders to come together, all right, and to form the Union of Burma, or to come together and form the Burmese nation. So the Panglong agreement was all these ethnic nations will get their representation in the parliament or in the government, yet they have to remain together as a nation, and that agreement was carried forward by Aung San. He was the modern revolutionary of Myanmar. He is the father of nation of Myanmar. Now, he did that, and in return, he actually guaranteed the independence of Myanmar as a unified state. However, history had some other designs, and the political people who were jealous of Aung San becoming the father of the nation or the next prime minister, they actually assassinated him. So he, along with his lot of political friends, were assassinated in July 1947, just at the time we were about to get independence, or India was about to gain independence. Just like Subhash Chandra Bose also lost his life last about in 1945, and we didn't hear about Subhash Chandra Bose thereon, and his death still remains a mystery. So with Aung San also, he was assassinated, like a lot of political leaders that have happened. That is something similar has happened to India also. We lost Indira Gandhi in Rajiv Gandhi in a similar way. So he was also assassinated by his political rivals. This is a picture of Subhash Chandra Bose during the formation of the INA, and along with him is the woman called Lakshmi Sehgal, the commander of the Rani Jhansi regiment of the INA. Now, let's look at this. How did Anglo-Burmese war actually happen? Because I'm sure that you might have your doubts about how British extended or made Burma a colony one by one or bit by bit. This is Lower Burma. All right. This is Assam, Manipur. This is Arkanyoma. It is also a mountain range here. And this is Tenasserim. All right. Now let's look at what happened. So the Burmese actually lost this pink shaded area during the first Anglo-Burma war. It included Assam and Manipur also. So you will be surprised to know, originally the Konbong kings of Myanmar owned Assam and Manipur, and that's why Assam and Manipur have very, very close cultural ties with Myanmar. So they have more in common with Myanmar or Bangladesh than they have with the rest of the India. So this was lost by Burmese by the Treaty of Yandabu. It's a very, very famous treaty that was signed in 1826. So the first war was between 1824 to 1826. So Myanmar ended up losing all these pink shaded territories in the first Anglo-Burmese war. So what was remaining? This entire red region and the green region was remaining in the after the first Anglo-Burmese war. In the second Anglo-Burmese war, British further annexed the red region or the Lower Burma region, right? It also included Rangoon or Yangon as we know today. Post which, in the third Anglo-Burmese war, since they had already access to the entire coastline, can you see this? This is the entire coastline of Burma, here, the lower one. Since they already had access to the entire coastline, they were very easily able to defeat Burma and access the rest of the mainland, which is the green region. And thus, by the third Anglo-Burmese war in 1885, British completely annexed complete Burma and made it a British colony. They had a separate mode of administration in Myanmar, but the rules and regulations were similar to what were happening in India, because British already worked on similar democratic or legislative principles. So it was no different. But obviously, Myanmar had more autonomy than India had, because all they wanted to do was to control India with an iron fist. That was not so much in Myanmar. As I told you, the major focus of British have always been India, because that was the source of their maximum revenue, and they never wanted to let go of it. So all the other nations that they've occupied in the vicinity were to actually keep a hold of India. I hope that answers your question. Yes, Shubham, at that point of time, Burma was being ruled by the Konbong kings. Alright, sorry. Konbong kings. Konbong, Konbong kings. I've already mentioned about them in the previous slide. Alright. Okay. Alright. Let's go on to the next part of Myanmarese history. So on 4th January 1948, Burma finally gained independence and became Union of Burma. It did not get separated like India did. However, Burma decided not to become a member of Commonwealth, as I've already told you, and a bicameral parliament was formed. However, due to a lot of infighting, the non-Burman ethnic groups, as I've already told you, there are a lot of ethnic groups in Burma. So 68% of them being Burmers. So apart from them, the remaining ones, the Shans, the Karens, the Rakhins, the Mons, Kaya and Indians and others, they were pushing for a lot of autonomy or federalism, which the Union of Burma did not want to give. So along with a weak civilian government at center and a lot of civil war infighting going on, the military leadership staged a coup d'etat in 1962. So that means the military rule took over. They said there is a lot of political instability in the country, so the military took over, just like what happens in Pakistan or just like what happened in Sri Lanka. So the military took over, And between 1962 to 1974, Myanmar was ruled by a revolutionary council headed by a general. That means it was ruled by the military, and almost all aspects of society, whether it be business, media, production, were nationalized or brought under the government control. And it was also called the Burmese way to socialism, which combined Soviet style nationalism, that means it was ruled like Russia, or the nationalism was taken from Russia, and central planning, that was also taken from Russia and India, and they started doing it. However, this entire period between 1962 to 1974 completely impoverished the Myanmarese nation. The people became extremely poor, and who suffers the most when the nation becomes poor? The employment suffers the most, and if there is lack of employment, who will protest the first? So the students started protesting against the Burmese general rule or the Burmese military rule. They said, you have completely ruined the economy, we don't get any jobs. And the students were further joined by other professionals, doctors, engineers, housewives, everybody joined in, and that became the famous uprising of 8888, or the 4 times 8 or the quadruple 8 uprising. This is a very, very famous uprising in Myanmarese history. Why is it called the 8888 uprising? Because this uprising peaked on 8th of August. So that means 8 and 8 of 1988, right? So this uprising actually peaked on 8th of August 1988, and hence it is called the 8888 uprising. It was also during this time that Aung San Suu Kyi had come to visit Myanmar to tender to her ailing mother, Aung Kyi. Her mother was known as Kha Kyi. So she came to actually tend to her ailing mother, and that point of time she decided to stay back after listening to people's problems, and since then she became an extremely important political figure in Myanmar and continues to be so. And that was the time when she was actually put under house arrest for more than 21 years starting from 1989. So this was the time when Aung San Suu Kyi gained prominence. Briefly about Aung San Suu Kyi, we'll be talking as we progress in the history, that where did she come from, why did she gain political prominence, and what does she stand for. We'll discuss all that. After this 1988 uprising, a second coup d'etat happened because the first military rule was not able to control Myanmar. The second military rule came over. They said, you're not able to control Myanmar. Now we'll have a... So military was overtaken by another military. So that was actually funny. And State Law and Order Restoration Council actually came into being. So after 1990, this council came into being, and for the first time we had free general elections in Myanmar in 1990, and Aung San Suu Kyi played an important role in it. So this is a childhood photo of Aung San Suu Kyi. This is how Aung San Suu Kyi looks right now. She is approximately 80 years old as of now. And briefly about her, you will be surprised to know she is an ex-student of University of Delhi. Her mother was an ambassador to India and Nepal during the 1960s. At that point of time, Aung San Suu Kyi followed her mother in India, and she graduated from the LSR College or Lady Shri Ram College in University of Delhi. So when she visited India after her house arrest ended in 2010, so when she visited India in 2011, she actually stopped at University of Delhi, her alma mater. She's also a graduate from the Oxford University, which holds her in very, very high regard. So she completed her political degree from Oxford and also graduated from the LSR College or the Lady Shri Ram College of New Delhi, and has very, very strong Indian roots. In fact, a lot of people during the time when she was house arrested... Sorry, is there a question? Yes, Konbong Kings. You're right, Shubham. And yes, you are right, Shubham. We can actually account for the World War II as the reason of freedom for everybody because British were losing their hold. So you're right. And Amit Raj, it is 88888, 4 times 8. 88, the last 88 is for 1988, and the other two 8s are for 8th August. So August is the 8th month, and the revolution peaked on 8th August. So that's why 88888. Okay, so you'll be surprised to know that during the time when she was under house arrest, it was often called that she is the next spiritual heir to Mahatma Gandhi, the way, the ideals in which she believed in, the way she wanted to handle everything peacefully, the way she wanted to utilize Buddhism to actually earn independence for her nation or to free her people from the military rule, she was actually declared to be a spiritual heir to Mahatma Gandhi. Now, this is who? Can you guess? This is Aung San. Not only the father of the Myanmarese nation, but also a very famous political revolutionist and the father of this great lady, which we know here as Aung San Suu Kyi. Now, a little bit about her history or her life will be very interesting to put. I would also recommend that you go and watch the movie The Lady to actually understand better about Myanmar. The Lady covers the life history or is a biographical film made on Aung San Suu Kyi. So it will actually introduce you to what was happening in Burma post-independence. So this lady, she had gone to Oxford and she was in London. She was working with United Nations under U Thant, who was the first Prime Minister or first Secretary General from Myanmar to the United Nations. So she was working under him. Obviously, this lady came from a very hugely successful and prominent political families of Myanmar. So she had access to the UN. So she was working there. During that time, she met her husband, Mr. Aris, Christian Aris, and they decided to get married in 1972. She had 2 sons from him. Post that, she was living a very, very happy and comfortable life. But then her mother was suffering from some illness, so she decided to come back to Myanmar. During the same time, the 8888 uprisings were growing on. At that point of time, she came to know about the problems that Myanmar was facing. So she decided to intervene and form the National League for Democracy, or the NLD party. That party gained a lot of prominence because of what she stood for and what she promised to the Myanmarese people. And in fact, in the 1990 first free elections, the NLD party, or the party formed by Aung San Suu Kyi, won 81% seats in the government. However, the results were nullified by the military junta and Suu Kyi was put under house arrest and the military rule continued. 1997, Myanmar was inducted into ASEAN. Despite the military rule, the neighboring nations actually supported its induction into ASEAN because everybody wanted a piece of, or a pie of, or a share of pie of the Myanmarese resources. In 2006, so if you all know, the earlier capital of Myanmar was Yangon or Burma or Rangoon. It was shifted to Naypyidaw, also known as the City of Kings. So the present capital of Burma or capital of Myanmar is actually Naypyidaw, also known as the City of Kings. Then came, but obviously, how far can you go ahead with your repressing tendencies and not come across a spring revolution in the advancement of it or in repercussions to it? So then in August 2007, exactly somewhere around 12 years after whatever happened, we came to Saffron Revolution. Now, why is it called the Saffron Revolution? This revolution was actually spearheaded by the Buddhist monks who are in a majority in Myanmar, and they are held in high esteem. So, since the color of their robes is saffron or saffron color, resembling saffron color, this revolution came to be known as the Saffron Revolution. It came because of the increase. So, the trigger for the revolution was the price of fuel. Overnight, the price of fuel in Burma increased by 66 to 100%. And if the price of fuel increases, you all know what happens. If the price of energy increases, everything becomes very, very expensive. So these monks actually retaliated against this, and this revolution was not dealt very lightly by the Myanmari junta or the military rule. They actually shut it down in a very, very violent manner, which was opposed by the rest of the world. And that actually led to a lot of pressure on Myanmar to actually free the country, or for the military rule to actually free Aung San Suu Kyi. And thus in 2010, after this revolution, Aung San Suu Kyi was released from house arrest. In 2011, the military junta was dissolved. And 2012, the first by-elections that happened in Myanmar, the National League for Democracy gained a landslide victory. This was the by-election. So when in 2015 the general elections happened, obviously Aung San Suu Kyi ruled the Myanmarese polity and she became a state councillor. As I've already told you, she was barred from being the president because she had married a foreign national, and so this was deliberately done to keep her out of politics. So she has become a state councillor, given the role of a prime minister. And 2017, what happens in Myanmar's history is the Rohingya genocide, about which we'll be talking going further. All right. Sorry, any questions so far? These are some of the photos. As I told you, the monks were actually protesting peacefully. And this is a cartoon which says, Myanmar says non-violence will not be tolerated. You can't go around creating a revolution in a non-violent way. And this non-violence, so once again, the Gandhian principles, whenever you want to write about Gandhi, the Gandhian principles ruled the day. This non-violent protest by the monks actually ended up saving Myanmar from the military rule any further, and in 2011 finally the military junta was dissolved. So this is a cartoon from there. As you can see, the robes of the monks are in saffron color, or the color of saffron, and hence it was called the Saffron Revolution. Now let's come to India-Myanmar relations history. Why is it important to know this? Because once we understand the India-Myanmar relations history, we will be better able to understand what are the areas of cooperation between India and Myanmar and what are the areas of disagreement between India and Myanmar. So obviously, India-Myanmar relationships date back to antiquity, and including not only just Buddhism but also the Burmese script, which is based on the India Grantha script, which is very close to the Tamil language. Also, Theravada Buddhism has tremendously influenced Burmese society, about which I've talked in detail. And around 90% of the Burmese population actually follows Theravada Buddhism. Alright. So, Buddhism is a common tie between India, Nepal, India, Sri Lanka, India, Myanmar and India, China. Let's come to British India, Burma. So, Myanmar was actually a province in British India. However, it was separated in 1937, and India, Burma, or British India and Burma is also related by the war cry which was given by Subhash Chandra Bose, about which I've already talked. After Myanmar gained independence, so Nehru was our first prime minister, and you know how he was very, very extremely friendly. So not just we had a treaty of friendship with Nepal or Sri Lanka in 1951, because his focus was to be very, very friendly with the neighbors, or with China also. So we had friendly treaties of friendship with not just three countries, but also with Myanmar. So in 1951, we signed a friendship treaty also with Burma, along with Nepal, Sri Lanka, China. The relationships between Burmese and Indo, or the Indian and the Burmese people, were very, very strong, because first of all, Burma was a province of India during the British times, and there was a flourishing commerce and common interest in regional affairs, because both these colonies wanted to gain independence from British. They had similar cultural history, they had similar religious history, so they both were very, very close, and the commerce was very, very high. So Indo-Burmese region, when we started off in 1950s, they were very, very close, and we were very friendly with Myanmar. The relations only got screwed or only got spoiled after the military came in power in 1962. And the things actually got spoiled, because India during 1962 to 1987 was very, very pro-democracy. It was the time when Indira Gandhi was there. And obviously, being the daughter of Nehru, she was pro-socialist and she was against any form of non-democracy, though it is very ironic because she didn't follow it in the country herself. But we were actually very pro-democracy. We made our stance very clear, and we were against the military junta ruling the Myanmaris. However, when Rajiv Gandhi came in, some practical sense came in, seeped in, and Rajiv Gandhi visited Myanmar in 1987. And just about as the relations were to get better, two things happened. First, the 1988 uprising, it happened, and the way it was shut down by the Burmese people, it actually repulsed India. India did not like in the violent way in which the 1988 uprising was shut down by the Burmese. And the second reason was, by 1989, we already lost Rajiv Gandhi to assassination by Sri Lankan Tamils. So both these things happened simultaneously, and the limited closeness that we had gained with Myanmar, it completely came to an end. However, coming back in 1991, when Narasimha Rao came, and when I have already discussed in the second and the third lecture about how Look East policy came to being, because we were facing a political dilemma, we were facing a balance of payment crisis, the rest of the Eastern Asia was doing very well. So Narasimha Rao decided to go ahead with the Look East policy. So since 1993, Narasimha Rao and his successors, be it Atal Bihari Vajpayee, be it Manmohan Singh, or even Narendra Modi, we have changed our stance. We have overlooked whether Myanmar is a democracy or not, and we tried to engage our investments and engagements in Myanmar since then. So, why are we doing that? First, because of the huge oil and natural gas resources that Myanmar has. Second, there was an immense security issue, as I talked about with you. The northeastern states are very, very unstable, and they share a huge border with Myanmar. So any instability at that border will actually lead to a huge security issue for India, leading to separatist process or even leading to separation of northeast from India. So that we don't want to happen. So that's why we changed our stance and we became very, very friendly with Myanmar. And in fact, Myanmar was one of the 2 countries invited to 2019 PM swearing in ceremony. Okay. Yeah, that sounds funny actually, Shubham. Nice idea. I agree. But actually, we have refrained from doing that because Nehru, when he came in, we have always recognized the sovereignty of nations that are different from us and who wanted to maintain their own cultural identity. So apart from India, we have never been really aggressionist. We have never tried to occupy a foreign territory. We have always recognized people's sovereignty. So that's why we have let go of Nepal. We have let go of Bangladesh, we have let go of Myanmar. But you're right, if we could have done that, but maybe even if we would have done that, what could have happened in the future is they would have left us because the ties weren't strong or they are actually very different culturally. So the entire cultural roots are not very, very similar. So the insurgency would have maybe increased and we would have lost Myanmar and maybe Northeast too along with Myanmar. So we are better this way, I guess. Yes, salute to Narasimha Rao. He was a very, very forward-looking man. So not just he gave us the Look East India policy, he also gave us the liberalization, privatization and globalization reforms. Okay, this is the joke that I was talking about. So during this time when Suu Kyi was under house arrest, that was in 1989, similar time when in 1991 we gave our Look East policy, can you see they have made a joke about gas. Myanmar is very rich in gas. So we said we'll better take the gas than support Suu Kyi in the democratic regime. Even when India is a very huge supporter of democracy being one itself. But however, as I told you when we were discussing the foreign policy relations, right? When we were discussing the foreign policy relations, that India is opposed to any to forcing any nation to actually become a democracy. This is one of our foreign policy principles. We believe in democracy. We would like nations to be a democracy because it is easier to deal with them. But nonetheless, we do not force a regime change. So this is a very, very famous cartoon. So during 1991, you can see we are more interested in the gas and this army general is farting. We are not interested that it is a military rule or it is a democratic rule. In fact, we have completely overlooked Aung San Suu Kyi being under house arrest. We were only interested in the natural resources and the security issues. This another cartoon is related to China, Pakistan and India and Myanmar's relationship. So you can see China keeps courting Pakistan. China keeps going closer to Pakistan. And when we say it is unfair, it does not listen to us. It has its own love affair with Pakistan, which it still does. And when India tries to have a similar love affair with Myanmar, which is China's neighbor, then China feels very bad about it. So this cartoon is about that how can you go ahead and be very favorable to Myanmar. In fact, as we progress in the video, you will realize that Myanmaris actually do not have much trust in China because of what happened in Sri Lanka in the past. Because Sri Lanka could not pay the debt on the Hambantota port, China completely occupied the Hambantota port. So Myanmar thought it was better to actually interact with India than to do it with China, because at least India does not come and grab all the land. So we started quoting Myanmaris and China did not like it. Let's talk about the areas of cooperation. Folks, if you want, we can discuss the rest of the whatever we have discussed, the rest of this entire session in the next class, or do you want me to continue? Is it okay if I continue? because it will take me another 40 minutes to finish this session. Yes, all nations are so lucky that they still have India. Are you okay with me continuing? Are we good to go? Because the session will be a little long because we've just started on the areas of cooperation. So let me know if you are all okay. So I should proceed ahead. Otherwise, I'll stop here and we'll discuss the areas of cooperation disagreements in the tomorrow's session. Should I proceed? Yes, you're right, Shubham. They actually learned it the hard way. But Myanmaris learned from other experiences, and I'll talk about how they have actually reduced China's investments in their port that China are developing from $7 billion to only $1 billion because they said we won't be able to pay the debt and we don't want you to actually grab our land there. Okay, so I'll continue. Great. Guys, the area of cooperation, first, obviously trade and economy, where we want to cooperate. So our trade has grown up from $12 million in 1981 to $2 billion in 2016-17. Myanmar has also been our beneficiary of the duty-free tariff that we actually give to the least developed countries. So Myanmar is considered to be a least developed country by India, and it is being given duty-free tariff line so that they can easily export to us and bridge the gap in the trade imbalances. Right now, the trade imbalance is in favor of India. India exports more and imports less from Myanmar. A lot of Indian companies such as SR, GAIL, ONGC Videsh Limited have invested in Myanmar's energy sector. As I've already told you, it's very rich in oil and gas. Also, the United Bank of India and Exim Bank have representative offices in Myanmar. So we also do a lot of banking in Myanmar, and recently SBI also opened its office in Myanmar. Indian firms actually engage in manufacturing services, banking, insurance, dry port and power sector in Myanmar. An important fact that you need to know about the trade and economy is India is the 5th largest trading partner of Myanmar and 5th largest destination for exports. So we are actually Myanmar's 5th largest destination for exports, so that's a good thing, and 6th largest source of import. So it imports lesser from us than it exports to us. The agriculture sector dominates the trade, particularly the supply of beans and pulses to India. However, recently India has put in some phytosanitary measures when the beans and pulses that come from Myanmar because they are not of good quality. And timber, as I've already told you, the Burmese timber is known. The timber of Burma is very, very good because of the forest that they have, because of the heavy rainfalls, and it's a hot and humid climate. So the timber is very, very soft and very good for making furniture. What does India export to Myanmar? India exports sugar, pharmaceuticals. Importantly, pharmaceuticals, because Myanmar is lagging into a lot of science and technology. So we actually export a lot of pharmaceuticals to them. The trade basket between India and Myanmar, as you can see, is very, very narrow. It's only a few goods and commodities which are exchanged. And this is subject to wide fluctuation. So we are actually not doing very good on the trade and economy front. And at present, India is the 11th largest investor in Myanmar. That means the foreign investment is only 11th. Who are the first, second, third? We'll see in a picture that I've added with this. So we'll see who are the first or the largest investor in Myanmar. So right now we have invested close to $743 million, which is even less than what we have invested in Sri Lanka or in Nepal by 26 Indian enterprises. And most of our investments are in the oil and gas sector. As I already told you, we are more interested in their oil and gas rather than in their democracy. So this is the foreign investments in Myanmar. So the largest one is by Singapore, followed by China, Hong Kong and Thailand. This is a little older data. As of 2019, Thailand is the largest investor in Myanmar. India only comes at 10th position as of 2017-18, and as of 2019, India is at the 11th position. I could not find the graph or the exact graph that I can denote here. So I took the data up till 2017-18. Now, let's look at the share of credit or share of trade that India versus China have within the Indian neighborhood or within the South Asia. So this is India's pie diagram, ring diagram, and this is China's ring diagram. So when you see at Myanmar, China invests close to, or China has a trade of close to $16 billion with Myanmar, whereas India only has a $2 billion trade with Myanmar. So there's a huge gap in the way we have investments compared to China. So this is about the entire neighborhood. So I will be using this figure further when we talk about all the other India-ASEAN neighbors. But here I wanted to show you that our engagement with Myanmar is still at subpar level and we really need to do a lot more. Also, and that is the reason, because we have very small trade ties with Myanmar. That is one of the reasons we are actually trying to develop a lot of connectivity within the India-Myanmar region to increase our trade. We are also trying to reduce the tariff lines. India and Myanmar are already a part of the ASEAN Free Trade Agreement, or called ISPTA. India-ASEAN Free Trade Agreement, India-ASEAN Free Trade Agreement. So Myanmar is already a part of that, and under BIMSTEC also India and Myanmar have a huge engagement, but we really need to work on our trade funds so that if the economies are intricately intervened, it will lead to better relationships, and also then the Myanmaris' dependence on the Chinese economy will further reduce and they'll come closer to the Indian orbit. What is the other area of cooperation? So India is building the Kaladan multimodal transport in Myanmar. I'll be talking about it in detail. And we are also talking about a road. It's a road, river, port, cargo. Why is it called multimodal? Because we are using the road, we are using the inland waterway, we are using the sea route, and we are also building another road route in Myanmar to actually access our own northeast. We also are developing the India-Myanmar-Thailand trilateral highway. It is also called Asian Highway, or AH1. It is a part of the Asian highway network that is being built around in the ASEAN countries. It's also called the Asian Trilateral Highway. I will discuss this in detail also. And this road is expected to boost trade and commerce in the ASEAN-India Free Trade Area. And as I already told you, India and Myanmar are both partners to the ASEAN Free Trade Agreement. Also, as a part of Sagar, we are doing a lot of port-led development. Sagar is security and growth for all, and we are developing the port under the security and growth for all scheme. So we are developing the Sittwe port in Myanmar in the Rakhine state, which also happens to be the Rohingya state. So I'll discuss that also in detail in the next slide. Now, this Sittwe port that we are actually developing is our answer to the Chinese fronted Kyokopu port, which is intended to cement China's geostrategic footprint in Rakhine. So we are actually investing in the same state as China to actually counter their presence. So it's actually related to the string of pearls theory also that the China is building around India, and also related to security and growth for all initiative of India. So let's see what these projects are. I will discuss this Bangla, China, India, Myanmar economic corridor also, but first let's discuss the other projects that I've mentioned. The first one being the Kaladan Multimodal Transit Project. As you can see, the Kaladan Multimodal Transit Project is starting from Kolkata, that is in West Bengal. Then we'll take the sea route through the Ganges or the Hooghly and move. After the sea route of 539 kilometers, we'll come to the Sittwe port, which is being developed by India under Sagar. And then through the river Kaladan, so the Kaladan is the river that flows in Myanmar, we will take an inland transport waterway of 158 kilometers, reach Palitwa in Myanmar in the Rakhine state, and then through the road network or highway that we'll be building of 129 kilometers in Myanmar, we will reach the India-Myanmar border to Mizoram, and we will end it at the Mole, a place called Mole in Mizoram, to actually access our northeastern states called Mizoram, because to actually go directly from northeast from Kolkata to Mizoram through the Sikkim corridor, it is actually a very long path. So at present, to go from Kolkata to Mizoram, you have to traverse somewhere 2000 kilometers, as it is given here, 1880 kilometers. That's what I call the chicken neck corridor, right? However, if you use this Kaladan multimodal project, you will only have to travel by 930 kilometers. Sorry. That means almost 1000 kilometers will be sliced off. That means you will have to travel 1000 kilometers less, and the distance will only come down to 930 kilometers. So that will save a lot of time, and it will give a lot of ease of access from Kolkata to Mizoram. Now this is a strip that is from the Indian Express newspaper. So the data is a little old here. It came in 2014 because we haven't made much stride in the Kaladan multimodal transit project. We are still trying to work around it. So we haven't made much strides into it. Yes, Myanmar is also, actually Myanmar is trying to avoid the debt trap which Sri Lanka had fallen into. But as of now, they are actually getting closer to China because they actually require the money, and they have been cornered for their human rights abuses and the Rohingya genocide. So China is at present the only country supporting it. India is also supporting Myanmar, but really we don't have the money to actually take forward our infrastructure projects. So we can only utilize our political and soft power. And also India is under a lot of what you say, duress or under a lot of pressure from United States and the other Western world. They are saying that you should boycott Myanmar because it is not following democracy. However, India has refused to fall into that trap, and it says it will actually support Myanmar because it has interest there. And if you really care about democracy that much, if the Western world really cares about democracy that much, then they should better handle Pakistan, which is creating so much of terrorism in India. So that's what India's answer has been. All right. Okay. Murray is in Mizoram. Amit. Okay. Let's come here. Now, so they will basically form NH 502A. It will be a new national highway 502A from Longtai town in Mizoram to Indo-Myanmar border at Jochardua village. So this village, I'm so sorry, you're right, Amit. It's the Longtai town in Mizoram and not the Mole. I'm so sorry for the faux pas. I think I got confused between the names. So they are actually forming this highway from Indo-Myanmarese border here till in Mizoram. It will be called NH 502A. So it will be a new highway that we will be developing in the northeast. Yes, Shubham, I talked about all these economies when I discussed the Look East policy, or the what do you say, the Act East policy of India. So I have discussed all these economies there. So you can go and watch that video. Is that okay? You can go and watch that video. I've already discussed. I think the second or the third lecture was about that. All right. Let's come to the project was actually expected to be completed by 2016, but obviously nothing has happened. And given the current coronavirus crisis, this thing is already elongated. So let's see how will we actually do it. This was the Kaladan multimodal transit project to access our northeast in a better manner. Let's come to the India-Myanmar Thailand Friendship Expressway, or also known as Asian Highway number 1. So you can see, sorry, this one has Moreh. We'll start from Moreh in Manipur, alright, and move on to Tamu in Myanmar, going through Mandale in Myanmar, also very, very ancient town, going through Mayawadi again in Myanmar to Meso in Thailand. So this highway is very, very unique. It is also supposed to boost the ASEAN +6 trade, right? So this is the highway which is here that I was talking about. It's from Moreh to Tamu in Myanmar, Tamu to Mandale in Myanmar, Mandale to Mayawadi in Myanmar, and finally Mayawadi to Meso. So it's very beneficial for Myanmar also, because it will connect a lot of hitherto unconnected towns in Myanmar and bring them into the trading route. Let's talk about the BCIM corridor first. Now, this was second in connectivity. Oh, I'm so sorry, Amit. My bad. My bad. Thank you for bringing it to my notice. My bad. There are so many names and I actually missed out on that. So, thank you for that. All right. Okay. Okay, let's come to the Bangladesh, China, India, Myanmar corridor, or BCIM proposed corridor. It connects India and China through Myanmar and Bangladesh. Now, it is ironical. At one end, we are trying to avoid the Chinese influence, but we also have a proposed BCIM corridor. Now, this BCIM corridor was actually proposed in 2011, and even before that, it was proposed by some other gentlemen, but we actually decided to take it forward to connect all the eastern economies here. However, the project was shelved because after the BRI initiative came in, or the Belt and Road initiative came in, and Government of India completely opposed it. So recently in 2019 only, we sent another delegation to Yuxi in China to actually say that look, we'll go ahead with the BCIM corridor, we will not shelve it, but nonetheless we will not make it part of BRI. And China has kind of agreed. So in the 35 corridor list that it has mentioned as a part of BRI, they have actually now skipped the BCIM corridor, and that's why it was in news. This corridor is 1.65 million square kilometers. It will cover 1.65 or approximately 2 million square kilometers, comprising approximately 444 million people in China, Bangladesh, Myanmar, West Bengal and Eastern India through a combination of rail, road, water and air linkages in the region. So let me just take you there, what this BCIM corridor is about. So it is the only trans-regional growth corridor that cuts across the remote northeastern states of India and connects the region to neighboring countries. This is the entire BCIM corridor which is shown here and which I have again shown here. It connects from Kolkata to Kunming. In fact, the BCIM corridor was a result of the Kunming initiative, which also holds these 4 countries together, BCIM. Bangladesh, China, India are a part of the Kunming initiative. Alright. So please go and Google the Kunming initiative. It actually also came in news during the recent India-China Galwan standoff, especially after what happened in the Galwan area when our 20 soldiers lost their life. This initiative was a lot in news because these countries were supposed to actually help India and China negotiate better on the border areas. So please go and look up for the Kunming initiative. It actually gets its name from the Kunming to Kolkata corridor, and this corridor is actually along the southern Silk Road, the ancient Silk Road, which happened to be a trade route between China and the rest of the world. So this new economic corridor actually tries to revive the ancient trading route. It's a 2,800 kilometer corridor, and it actually assumes to link Kolkata via Mandalay and Dhaka, the incoming states, going finally through the Kunming. However, as I told you, that it is now not included in the BRI. The problems with this entire corridor is first, ethnic insurgency, because it passes through some of the most violent civil war struck countries, both in Bangladesh and Myanmar. And also it goes through the northeastern corridor, which is not a very safe zone. It still has a lot of insurgency. So there's a lot of problems in actually building this corridor through that part. There's a lot of cross-border human trafficking and terrorism. These are the main threats to actually building anything economical or commercially viable there. Actually, Shubham, if you do that, I'm glad you're asking such questions because they are really good questions, Shubham. So kudos for that. Actually, we should not opt out. See, you cannot ignore the Chinese dragon. All you can do is to work together with it because you can't change the geography. That's the whole idea of doing international relationships, right? How you run well with your neighbors actually gauges your ability to run your foreign policy in an effective way. We have to recognize the elephant in the room that China is. We have to recognize its power, and we have to come out with our own policy to deal with it in a non-aggressive, yet in a way that we can cooperate with each other rather than fighting with each other or competing with each other, because actually it leads to a loss of economy. It leads to a lot of political concentration which can be given anywhere else, right? Because they are still international countries. We also have a lot of domestic problems that we need to look after for. So really, it's not advisable to get into fight with your neighbors. The better friendly relationships you are able to maintain with your neighbors, the better it is for India. At least being aggressive has nothing in positive for India. All right? Okay. We have discussed this. Now let's move on to the port development in Myanmar. I already talked about the Sittwe port. Sittwe is here in the Rakhine state. This is the Rakhine state we already discussed, from where the Rohingyas come in from. And this is Kyeokfu. This port is being developed by China, and we will also see that from here China is actually taking the gas all the way to Kunming and Nanning. So they already have, China, Myanmar already have a trans-Myanmar oil and gas pipelines. We are also trying to build one, but they already have this. So that's why the trade relations are very strong between China and Myanmar, and China is actually able to utilize Myanmar's natural resources, while we are still trying to ramp up our infrastructure in Myanmar. We are still doing the Sitwe port project. Now, China is also involved in developing the Yangon port. So they are developing, just like the Colombo city project in Sri Lanka, they are also having a Yangon city development project in Myanmar. All right. Let's come to the other areas of cooperation. So we provide a lot of developmental assistance or soft loans to Myanmar. So approximately in the region of $2 billion. All right. And India, unlike other countries, India just does not tell Myanmar where to spend money. We just give them the money whenever they ask for it, or for whatever reasons they want to spend the money. And the bulk of the assistance is grant funded. That means they don't have to repay back. Where are we giving the money? We are giving the money for the Kaladan project, for the trilateral highway project, which is an east-west corridor connecting our northeast with Myanmar, and the Reethidim road. I haven't discussed it. I want you to go and Google the Reethidim road that we have it between India and Myanmar. This is your homework for today. Go and look for it. What is it? What is this area of cooperation? We are also helping them set up Myanmar Institute of Information Technology. We are very good with IT. We are helping them in setting up agricultural research and education, and Myanmar India Center for Enhancement of IT Skills. We are very good with IT, so we are helping them a lot in that area, and Myanmar actually requires a lot of science and technology cooperation from us. Also, we are giving them, under the MOU which we signed with them in 2012, each year India gives $5 million to Myanmar to develop its border infrastructure. So it's a $25 million deal that we signed in 2012 to develop the Indo-Myanmarese border. In the first year, we have come up with schools, health centers and 8 bridges in the Chin state and Naga self-administered zone of Myanmar. So that better infrastructure will lead to better living conditions for the northeastern population and the bordering areas of Myanmar, which will actually increase trade and make people's life better. India has also helped Myanmar in disaster relief, and it has also trained a lot of personnel in natural disaster management. So we were there to actually help Myanmar during the calamities like Cyclone Mora in 2017, Cyclone Kuman in 2015 and the Shan state in 2010. As you will actually see when we go back here, that is this place. If you look at the map here, this entire place, if you see, this entire place, the Arkan to the lower Burma to the Tenasserim region, is the entire coast of Myanmar, and it actually is very, very cyclone prone, just like Bangladesh is. Every year you hear Bangladesh being hit by a cyclone. Every year you hear Odisha and the other eastern coastal states being hit by a cyclone. So is the case with Burma. These regions are actually they receive a lot of high rainfall because the Arkan Yoma range is there, which actually stops the monsoon and leads to a lot of rainfall. And this region is also prone to a lot of cyclones. Every year you will hear some or the other cyclone hitting Myanmar, and India has been very particular in actually helping out Myanmar with the cyclones and national disaster relief. So that is what I wanted to show you. Now let's move on to the next part of India-Myanmar cooperation, which is the defense cooperation. So coming here, India and Myanmar have bilateral military exercises, IMBACs, India-Myanmar bilateral military exercises or army exercises, or India-Myanmar naval exercises in the Indian Ocean, and we are also training their army. So we are training their army to be able to participate in the UN peacekeeping operations. So defense cooperation is huge there. In fact, recently we had also invited Myanmar to participate in the Milan exercise in March 2020. However, due to Corona, we actually could not carry it through. Otherwise, it would have been a multilateral military exercise between India and Myanmar. Also, to combinedly resist the insurgency in the northeastern areas and the India-Myanmar borders, we conducted two joint military operations in 2018 and 2019 respectively, Operation Sunshine in the Rakhine state of Myanmar, because a lot of Rohingya terrorist outfits were actually troubling Myanmar there, and there was a lot of insurgency in our northeastern Indian states of Arunachal, Nagaland, Manipur and Mizoram also. So we conducted the Operation Sunshine 1 and 2 in 2019. This actually picked up pace after Prime Minister Modi visited Myanmar in 2018. And also to deepen the defense relations, when Prime Minister Modi visited Myanmar, we actually signed a landmark defense agreement, defense cooperation agreement with Myanmar in 2019. We are also taking part in a lot of naval exercises in the Bay of Bengal under the BIMSTEC initiative. And we took the historic India-Myanmar naval exercises in 2018, also called IMNEX 18. Now, let's move on further to the defense cooperation. So, to elevate Made in India arms industry, India has identified Myanmar as a key to its military exports. So, China is already supplying a lot of weapons to Myanmar. So, India said, why not we should do it? We are already going ahead with Made in India. So, why not export our made in arms and ammunitions to Myanmar, which actually requires them a lot. So, we are also having a defense cooperation in that agreement. We have, and under this actually exporting arms and ammunitions to Myanmar, we have exported our anti-submarine torpedo called Tal Shaina in 2017, and in 2019, Myanmar was also given the diesel electric kilo class submarine called INS Sindhuveer, which India modernized after taking it from Russia. So we got it from Russia, we modernized it and then we sent it to Myanmar. We have also sent to Myanmar our anti-submarine torpedo called Tal Shaina. So we are also getting into military cooperation in the areas of weapon exports with Myanmar. This is our next look forward to area when it comes to engagement with Myanmar. So this is extremely important. If you really want to remember something from the Defense Corporation, there are two things. We are conducting military exercises to fight insurgency and to train Myanmar. And the second one is we are actually exporting arms and ammunitions to Myanmar to further our weapon industry. Okay. You're right, Abdul. That is true. No, they are paying for it. That's the reason we actually want to increase our exports. So they are actually paying for it. Cultural ties. I've already talked about the Buddhist history. Let's come on to some other things. So under the ITEC and Colombo plan, about which I talked in the Sri Lankan class when we discussed the India-Sri Lanka relations, that India actually takes part in technically training the people from the developing countries under the ITEC or India Technical and Economical Cooperation and Colombo plan. So just like Sri Lanka was given 370 slots out of the 10,000 spots that we have for people, India has given 525 slots to Myanmarese people to come to India, get trained in various disciplines and go back to Myanmar. There's a lot of Indian community in Myanmar. There are approximately 2 million people, so forming 2% of population of Myanmar, which are of Indian origin. They are living and working in various parts of Myanmar. The NRI community in Myanmar, that is the Indian NRI community that lives in Myanmar, mainly lives in Yangon, or which is the commercial capital of Myanmar, or Mandalay. They are engaged in the export-import business or as employees of MNCs which are based out of India, Singapore or Thailand. So a lot of MNCs which are based out of India, Singapore and Thailand have their expats living in Myanmar to do trade and to do export-import business. So the expats that live from India in Myanmar are approximately between 8 to 10,000 and the people of Indian origin are approximately 2 million. So we have a significant diaspora there. However, our PM has actually failed to engage with the Indian diaspora in Myanmar. We should actually do that. And in fact, it is said that the Indian people living there, they actually do not like India much because they were not handheld by India when they required our help. So it is often said that we actually ignore our poor neighbors when it comes to people of Indian origin or comes to our Indian diaspora. We actually go to the rich Indian diaspora which is settled in the European and the Western world. So we really need to make a course of correction here. They might have, Abdul, they might have that Chinese backing. In fact, China not only might have supported them, China also supports a lot of terrorist outfits which are causing civil war in Myanmar. So Chinese intentions are completely dubious here. You can say that. Multilateral partnership, I've already talked about. So Myanmar is a key component of India's strategy in South-South cooperation. What is South-South cooperation? So all the countries which form a part of the global south, that means fall below the equator, are under the South-South cooperation, especially India and its neighbors, India and Australia, India and New Zealand, all the southern world actually forms a part of the South-South cooperation, including Southern America. So Myanmar is the key or bridge to India, South-Southeast Asia cooperation, South-South cooperation, BIMSTEC cooperation, and Myanmar's membership in ASEAN, BIMSTEC, MGC, I've already talked about it when we talked about our Look East and Act East policy, the Mekong Ganga Corporation, right? So they have given a very regional and sub-regional dimensions to our bilateral relationships with Myanmar, and it's especially important in our Act East policy with Myanmar. Also, we have supported Myanmar's association with SAARC as an observer, which it acquired in the 2008. So China and Myanmar both are observer states to SAARC. We have not liked China's inductment in 2005 in SAARC, but we have really supported Myanmar's inductment in SAARC as an observer, and we really like Myanmar to be there because it increases our bilateral engagement with Myanmar. Here we will talk about the Rohingya issue. So Sujan, if you're still with me, this is the time when I'm going to talk about the human rights and the Rohingya issues in detail, alright? So these are two political cartoons that actually talk about Abdul, you'll have to let go of the CAA. I'm not talking about the CAA here. Alright. So you'll have to let go of that issue. Okay. Let's talk about the human rights issue and the Rohingya issue here. So as this cartoon shows, this is Aung San Suu Kyi. These are the Rohingyas. So if you can see in this cartoon, both China and India have completely ignored, or rather say conveniently ignored, the Rohingya issue and extended a hand of friendship. And if you can see, Modi is outgoing to actually extend a hand of friendship when it compares to China, so that Myanmar does not fall into the orbit of China, and that's where we are extending a friendly hand to Myanmar, despite knowing that the Rohingyas have been persecuted by Myanmar in a big way, and India is actually a very big supporter of human rights. And should have been against the Rohingya genocide. Also, this another cartoon is about the military shooting Myanmar or executing Rohingyas in Myanmar, and the UN saying that it's a genocide, with the military actually answering back saying that it's just a standard target practice. That means they don't actually consider it to be a big issue. In fact, they don't even recognize it as a genocide, because once you recognize it as a genocide, you are answerable to the international community in the International Court of Justice, which has actually recently happened. So let's first discuss who these Rohingyas are and what are they, what is the exact issue. So basically, according to Rohingyas, let's discuss the Rohingya side of story. Rohingyas are mainly found in the Rakhine state of Myanmar, along which we are building, both India and China are building the Sitwe and Krakyopo ports. So these people actually belong to there. They are an ethnic minority. Approximately 4 to 9% of people are Rohingya Muslims. They are a Muslim minority in Myanmar, which is predominantly a Buddhist nation. So as per Myanmar, it considers them to be Bangladeshi immigrants. It says that all these Rohingya Muslims have come from Bangladesh. They actually don't belong to Myanmar. Neither does their culture align with the normal Myanmarese culture. Rohingya say that they have been there in Myanmar, they have been there in Rakhine since as old as 8th century. They have historical ties with Myanmar, and they are closer to Myanmar when it comes to cultural or other ties, rather than being closer in ties with Bangladesh. Bangladesh, on the other hand, considers them to be illegal immigrants and does not take them in. So the Rohingya crisis is actually brewing because they were persecuted within Myanmar in 2017, especially in August A lot of Rohingya Muslims were killed and massacred in Myanmar. And when they tried to flee that country, they went to Bangladesh and India. India refused to take them in. Bangladesh refused to take them in. So a lot of Rohingya insurgency has actually started. So just like what happened with Tamilians in Sri Lanka, that Litte came about because Tamils were being executed. Here also Rohingyas have formed a militant outfit and they are actually carrying out a lot of terrorist activities in Myanmar. So Myanmar wants to throw them out, and as of now, there has been a lot of silence from Aung San Suu Kyi regarding the shootings that have been or the atrocities that have been carried out against Rohingyas. The women have been raped, that people have been killed, they have been thrown out of the country without any livelihood, but she has remained silent on that. She said it's not a genocide and we just don't want any illegal immigrants. That's been her stance. And instead of actually opposing her or asking, demanding her for the human rights violations that have taken place, which India and China both have decided to look the other side and have decided instead to go for economic cooperation. So they have kept the economics aside from the politics. And Aung San Suu Kyi is being criticized on a global scale for whatever is happening in Myanmar. And right now, Myanmar is completely cornered on the Rohingya issue. This issue has been taken to the International Court of Justice by Gambia. And now I'll talk about, Shubham, what you have been talking about, why the Islamic people are not taking them in. So nobody is taking them in, that is true. But it was one nation, Gambia, which is predominantly a Muslim state and a part of Organization of Islamic Cooperation. So OIC. They, as a part of that, the Justice Minister of Gambia actually visited Rohingyas, actually visited Myanmar somewhere back in 2018. And he decided to take the issue of Rohingya crisis or Rohingya genocide to ICJ. And as of now, Myanmar has been asked to answer this question. However, apart from India and China and Russia maybe, nobody else is supporting Myanmar on this issue globally. The Western world is completely against Myanmar and a lot of sanctions have been put. And Myanmar is under a lot of pressure. China is trying to take advantage of that pressure and trying to form a lot of economic deals with Myanmar. Myanmar is treating cautiously, but nonetheless they had to give in because they required money. So just to counter the Chinese influence, Prime Minister Modi also went in 2018 and said he supported Aung San Suu Kyi, whatever she is doing is right, and we also would want to have economic relationships. So there's nothing clearly which is coming out of the Rohingya issue, but nonetheless the entire Western world is siding with them. But as you know, everybody knows the elephant in the room. Everybody knows they are a persecuted minority. But just like what happened with Syrian refugee crisis, nobody was willing to take them in. So nobody is willing to take Rohingyas also in. They are unlike Jewish people who were very good traders. There is no such good thing attached with Rohingyas. They are a poor lot. They are not doing economically or educationally well that they will be taken in. You know, see the hypocrisy of the entire world. When it comes to taking in the Hong Kong nationals who are very well educated and doing economically, both UK and Australia have opened their borders. But when it comes to poor people who don't have access to anything, they are not being taken in by anybody. So it's a geopolitical issue, it's an economical issue which is being discussed here. So they're not being taken by anybody in. And India, we already have a surge of Afghani refugees, we already have a surge of Tamil refugees, we already have a surge of Bangladeshi refugees. We clearly don't have the interest and intent to support any more refugees coming from any other states, because we are already reeling under a lot of terrorist pressure, because all these people who are stateless migrants, they can pose a bit security threat. So we are not letting them in. And the other nations, they are very conservative on their borders, so they are not letting the Rohingyas in. So I hope I've answered your question here. Now let's look at what is the human rights issue and the Rohingya issue in a little bit more detail. See, the reason why, yes, there are so many, Shubham, but nobody is willing to let them in. See, all the countries are reeling under a lot of economic pressure. So they will definitely not take them in, whatever the case might be. And there are a lot of security implications of taking in illegal migrants, because it might actually brew up or spoil your relationships with your neighborhood states. See, for example, you and your brother have a fight, or you or some of your siblings have a fight. If some other person comes in and start taking the side of your sibling, will you like it? You won't like it. So it's a similar thing with the nations. And Abdul, answering your question, well, Shubham, it goes both ways. So Rohingyas were attacked and they counter-attacked. So it goes both ways. So I wouldn't take a side here. Let's not get into judgments here, Shubham. My class is not to pass judgments. We are supposed to study issues from a very neutral perspective, right? All right? Okay. And humanitarian issues actually come in, it's not because of community. See, there's always a difference in which people follow their cultural or religious practices. So that's one reason. There is always a case of cultural hegemony, and these are intricately linked to the economics. So whenever there is a minority, you need to provide for them, and the majority definitely does not like that. It happened in India. Hindus and Muslims are a minority here. There have been so many riots because they have to be given economic benefits, and their cultural ways are very different from the Hindus, so they are also persecuted. We've also persecuted Christians for the same region. The same similar region, Jews were persecuted by the Nazi Germany. So these issues are more to do with the cultural ties. You don't have significant cultural similarities, or simply speaking, uh, people have nothing better to do, so they actually engage in a lot of fights just for their own fun. That's how you can put it. Otherwise, there is actually no reason to actually persecute the minorities. And of course, there are bigots on both areas, whether it be Rohingyas or the cultural majority, they're the Burmese people, or when it comes to Sri Lankan Tamils or the Sinhalese. So there are bigots in both the areas. And when these bigots take actually the mainstream rather than being side stream, they actually lead to partition, like what happened in India, or to civil war, what happened in Sri Lanka or in Nepal or in Myanmar, right, we are having right now. So it's like that. Yes, in the UPSC exam, you never take sides. You only explain the issue from the point of an observer, because if you are biased, you will not be able to take correct decisions which secure your national interest. So you always write very unbiased answers. You always try to explain the issue as is, and what you give in the end is a way forward, that look, this is how the issue looks like from the outside and this can be done. So your tone has to be extremely neutral. You cannot take the sides of any one nation. You cannot be a bigot. You cannot be religiously or community-wise biased. That's how you answer the UPSC question. Abdul, that we leave out for the next discussion. All right, because that's a huge issue. It's a very debatable issue. So I'll leave that question out for right now. We'll come on to the human rights and the Rohingya issue as of now. Let's come to the human rights issue. So as I already told you, in 2007, there were a lot of Burmese anti-government protests, the Saffron Revolution, which happened. And India obviously was very hesitant in actually calling out Myanmar because we had our own interest. So it actually diminished India's political or democratic credentials because we were more interested in the gas, as the meme that I showed you. The Rohingya issues, again, we have taken the side of Myanmar. Our PM has actually publicly sided with Aung San Suu Kyi, saying that whatever Myanmar government is doing with the Rohingya issue is their internal dispute. We really don't have any consideration with that. It's their domestic affair. And they have declared Rohingyas to be illegal migrants. Why have they declared them to be illegal migrants? See, first of all, India is not a signatory to the UN Refugee Convention. And also the Rohingyas came to India before August 2017, when actually the entire pogrom against them started. So India says they actually illegally migrated to India. They are not political refugees, so we are not taking them in. In fact, we are actually repatriating a lot of Rohingya refugee population back to Myanmar. There is again a very famous cartoon regarding that. So Bangladesh, right now the Rohingyas are actually in the refugee camps in Cox's Bazar in Bangladesh, and also in the Bhashan Char Island in Bangladesh. Bhashan Char Island. Right now it has become a refugee colony. I have also taken up this question in my prelims mock test series when I discussed it on Unacademy. So we discussed the Bhashan Char Island in detail there. I want you to go and look up Cox's Bazar and Bhashan Char Island on the Atlas of the world, or Atlas of Bangladesh, or the map of Bangladesh. So this cartoon is about, right now they're in a refugee camp. They are living in very, very dilapidated conditions, yet they are not willing to be repatriated to Myanmar. So you can see Myanmar has been depicted as a tiger which is ready to eat them. So they say no Rohingya is willing to take the repatriation offer. The second cartoon, as I told you, that Rohingyas is being kicked out by every other nation. So the Rohingya repatriation is a big issue right now. Bangladesh is kicking them, Myanmar is kicking them, Thailand is not taking them, Malaysia is not taking them, Indonesia is kicking them. So Shubham, I hope it answers your question. None of the Muslim dominated regions is actually willing then to take the Rohingyas. They are still left stranded. It's the most persecuted minority in the entire world. Talking about the ICJ case, I want to bring it to your notice that, okay, I think we already discussed the ICJ, that Gambia actually bought it there, and on January 2020, so it's a very, very recent development. Please keep a close eye. We have discussed till January 23, 2020, because after that the coronavirus crisis happened, so no further action has been taken on the Rohingya genocide and the ICJ. So please keep a close eye on whatever happens in the International Court of Justice with relationship to Myanmar, because it has huge implications in the way China or India deals with it, or the rest of the world deals with the the Rohingya genocide issue. Let's move on to the third issue. This thing, POC4, was in lot in news. All right, when the Chinese President Xi Jinping visited Myanmar in January 2020. All right, he is shown here with a shopping cart, which shows he has come up with a lot of offers for Myanmar, and it also shows this cartoon was actually released by the Myanmarese press, and it actually depicts that they are not very happy with Xi Jinping coming in, because they feel that China is a very self-interested nation. They really do not like China at all. And again, China has come in to take advantage of the Myanmaris with a lot of sops for them, and Myanmar won't be able to say no. However, how the China puts it, China says that we have been backing Myanmar since a very, very long time, which is true also. When everybody banished Myanmar, be it when they were ruled by a military, or be it now when the Rohingya genocide is going on there, China has always had their backing. It has been supplying it weaponry, it has been giving it economic help. However, Myanmar obviously feels that all this is in self-interest of China, and it is actually trying to maintain a safe distance from China, seeing the experiences of the other neighborhood nations who have interacted with China on a grander scale. POC4 actually means in Burmese language. This term POC4 was given by Xi Jinping when he visited Myanmar in January 2020. POC4 means in Burmese language siblings from the same mother. So China says that we are like another sibling from the same mother for Myanmar. It's our brother nation, and we are always there to support the Burmese. So let's see what has happened recently. So when the international community banished Myanmar, China actually went there and signed 33 memorandum of understanding with the Myanmarese government. And in fact, Aung San Suu Kyi, who is supposed to be a democratic forebearer, actually got into a lot of engagement with China. So that was, she was criticized internationally for engaging with China at such a high level. And as you can see in this cartoon also, the dragon is driving the Myanmarese lion, or the Myanmarese tiger, whatever you choose to make out of it. So they are driving the entire engine of the Myanmarese economy. So after 2011, once the Myanmar became independent, so a lot of Western nations actually approached Myanmar, and that point of time, Myanmar distanced itself completely from China because it had never trusted China. However, after this entire Rohingya issue in 2017, all the Western nations, along with India, they drew some distance from Myanmar, and that's when China came in. So if you recognize very closely, whether it be Nepal, whether it be Sri Lanka, whether it be Myanmar, whenever there is a human rights issue, China completely ignores the human rights issue. China only focuses on what it wants. So all the nations which are every time segregated, be it Pakistan also, whenever a nation is segregated, China feels it is an important opportunity. It goes on, it strikes, and it raises a hand of friendship. At that point of time, it goes, raises a hand of friendship, says, don't worry, If everybody else has forgiven you, or if everybody else has forgotten you, I will come in, I will give you all the aid, I will help you out, come out of this situation. And that's why the nations get into a debt trap with China, and then it goes around occupying their territories. In fact, recently it was showing in news yesterday itself, China has a border dispute with more than 22 nations in its vicinity. It has a dispute with goddamn it everybody, because it goes there, gives them the economic help, and in lieu of the economic help tries to grab their territory. So that's why Myanmar decided that it will maintain a distance, but nonetheless it could not happen because the Western world shunned Myanmar completely. So now again China is back in 2020 back to Myanmar, and Myanmar actually had to play by Chinese tunes. However, this time India has played a little bit more strategically. So despite a lot of pressure from the international community to completely banish Myanmar, our Prime Minister visited Myanmar in 2018, but since we do not have the economic clout, we are trying to utilize our political power to convince USA and the other Western states that if you keep banishing Myanmar instead of actually hugging it, what will happen is you will send it further into the orbit of China, which is not good for Asia Pacific. Right? If you segregate something, they will go to China, and then China will increase its power. So it is better that we actually engage more with Myanmar and pressurize it into becoming a democracy or better handling the Rohingya genocide. It is an interest of everyone. All right, and then collectively we can take care of the Rohingya people. So India has been providing them with food, India has been tending to them, but India is also repatriating to them. So India has twin interest here. India says if we engage with Myanmar more, first of all, it won't go to the Chinese and create a disruption for the rest of the world. Second, if we actually help out Myanmar more rather than actually discouraging it, Myanmar might be able to take its refugees back. Otherwise, it will lead to another refugee crisis in Asia Pacific, which is not beneficial to any of the Asian economies. And if the Asian economic engine shuts down, then the entire world will shut down. So that is the way India is trying to actually explain it to its Western world or to its Western allies. And also securing its own strategic interests. So India is behaving very nice politically here. We are playing all our cards very right, and I think it should see us through positively in Myanmar. So what were the three important projects that were discussed in the Chinese visit to Myanmar in 2020? First was the China-Myanmar Economic Corridor that is running from Kunming in Yangon to Kyokpyu. It's a very, very important port for China because it holds a lot of gas, and China wants to take its gas pipeline, as I've already showed you on the map. So it's a very, very economic corridor. India wants to bring up the BCIM corridor or the Kaladan multimodal project in opposition to this China-Myanmar economic corridor. Then the Kyoko deep sea port. It's a dual use facility for China, military as well as commercial uses. In Hambantota, Sri Lanka has already told China not to use it as a military base. But Kyoko port, because if Myanmar is disintegrated from the rest of the world, it might give Kyoko port, deep sea port to China for commercial uses. Now, why it is a deep sea port and it is a sign or ringing bell to us? Because deep sea ports can harbor very, very huge ships. So huge ships means it can bring in more armoury or weaponry in very, very close areas of India's oceanic regions or India's maritime borders. So it is not very helpful, and that's why we are developing the Sitwe port there, so that even we can keep a close eye on what China is doing in the Kyokpyu port in Myanmar. And the third is the new Yangon city project. However, interestingly, even during these visits, I will answer your question, Shivani. Just give me 2 minutes. I will answer all your questions together. Just let me complete this topic and I will answer your questions. Another interesting issue is here. Though Beijing tried to coax a lot Myanmar, but Myanmar did not completely give in. So there is another very important project called the Mistion Dam project in in Myanmar. So China was supposed to build this Mistion Dam. It's a very huge dam being built in Myanmar. So I want you to Google it. Initially, China was given the project, but relating to certain ecological and environmental concerns, and after a lot of repulsion by the Myanmarese people against China, Myanmar decided to take this project back from China. So even recently also, it has finally not given the Keystone Dam to China. It has still resisted to give this dam project to China. And also in the port facilities that the that China is developing, the QP deep sea port that China is developing, earlier it was supposed to be a $7 billion project. Now Myanmar has asked it to tone it down to only $1.3 billion because it does not want to fall in a debt trap. So though Myanmar is engaging with it, but it is still being very cautious about it. So now I'll answer all your questions, what your questions are. Yes, Srihari, this is the type in which you are supposed to actually answer the questions. Yes. And again, yes, this is like British's subsidiary alliance. You are right. You can compare it to subsidiary alliance. India has Western allies, Shivani. US is a Western. If you have gone through the news recently, when whatever has happened in Galwan, China has decided to pull back its troops, it's because India has very strong Western allies. And right now, they're all traumatized by China. So Australia, Japan, USA, all have, and even the European countries have come together to support India. So the Quad Plus, or the Quad as it is known, is supporting India. And USA is again one of very strategic allies of India. In fact, the strategic partnership was recently discussed. We are very, very close to the US. And especially when it comes to rising Chinese influence, it was US who actually gave us the Look East policy, who actually made us the pivot to Asia and the Asia Pacific region. And China connecting sea routes and BRI. Yes, actually that's one of, you can put it like that. China says it is for connectivity, but the entire world is actually seeing it as a measure to control the entire world economy and finally to control the world. Basically, Sivanjani, if you really want to understand this, please go back and look at India-China relations part 1 and India-China relations part 2. And also when I discuss the India-China border dispute, all these videos are available on YouTube. Here I have in detail discussed the race to become a superpower. Why is China doing what it is doing? Because China wants to earn its place in the global nationhood. It wants to establish its hegemony once again. It was a very respected country in the past. It wants to gain back that respect again, but it clearly does not know how to do that. So I have actually completely addressed all your issues if you watch my previous lectures. It is my sincere request to all of those who come to my IR series, please watch the complete IR series before you come to the classes, because a lot of what I teach going further is intricately linked to what I have taught in the past. So please go and watch those videos again and again. If required, please make your own notes, because then you will gain complete clarity about all the issues that I'm talking here. Because I have set up a context, I have already done the background setting up in my earlier lectures. So it will not be very fruitful if I discuss it again here. All right, let's go to the way forward. So this is Modi meeting Aung San Suu Kyi in 2016, and this is Modi meeting Aung San Suu Kyi in 2018, right? So we have been engaging with Aung San Suu Kyi, who is a state councillor, prime minister there, and a very well-known national figure in Burma. So what is the way forward? Both countries have a lot in common when it comes to border issues. They have a lot of terrorist outfit on their borders which are influencing them badly. So this is an area of cooperation where we can look forward to. Myanmar is an emerging consumer market with 16 million people, right? So in fact 66 million people. So it's a huge market for India. So India can actually export beverages, smartphones. So India can leverage these export opportunities with Myanmar, and we already have the ASEAN Free Trade Agreement with Myanmar. Also, the other few sectors where India can extend its presence are manufacturing high-end smartphones, cement, furniture, FMCG, energy, telecommunications. Myanmar has very, very strong river presence, riverine presence. The Irrawaddy River is there. So we can actually go ahead and build hydropower projects there and create energy for them or export energy to them. Low-cost housing development, as we did in Sri Lanka. We actually completed 46,000 houses for Sri Lankan Tamils out of 50,000. So that's a huge, huge plus for us. We can show our similar credentials and build houses in Myanmar. Ports and logistics, we are already developing the ports, and rural electrification. So right now, Myanmar's economy is open to all these developments. So we should go ahead and participate in that. It will be a huge plus for us. Also, agriculture is another sector where India can substantially cooperate with Myanmar or help Myanmar, especially in the post-harvest technology or especially in growing a lot of varieties of rice. So like India, Myanmar also has a huge rice eating population, and we have done phenomenal research in growing varieties of rice. We have more varieties of rice than any other nation on this planet. So we can go and help Myanmar in food cooperation. Also, the success of our Act East policy will impeccably depend on our ability to pragmatically approach Myanmar for completion of the various projects like Kaladan or the Trilateral Highway. If we are able to conclude them successfully, we will be able to show our infrastructure credentials, which we also lost out in Sri Lanka, and that's why Sri Lanka went to China. So if we are able to correctively and pragmatically take forward all these projects, we will actually be able to successfully implement our Act East policy and form our way towards inside the Myanmaris. We will actually be able to court the Myanmaris lady. And finally, enhancing economic partnership with Myanmar needs to be a priority in India's Act East policy if we are to go any further, because Myanmar right now requires a lot of investments. Also, it will benefit New Delhi in enhancing ties with Southeast Asia. It will also help Delhi in curbing the terrorism Northeast. It will also help New Delhi in linking the Northeast with the rest of the Southeast Asia or the rest of the Asian countries. With that, I'll end today's session. Okay, cricket. That's a nice one. That's a nice joke, but maybe we'll have to find some other sport. All right, guys. Any doubts so far, or should we call it a day? Folks, this is my Telegram group link for current affairs. All right. This is the group. This is the Telegram channel link. At both these places, I post all my upcoming videos in IR and my sessions on Unacademy. So as of now, I am taking prelims mock test series on Unacademy. So if you like this video, on the Unacademy sessions, we solve questions from the current affairs each day at 8:30 p.m. in the evening. These are free classes. Everyone can attend. All right. And there, the best part is that you will always have me present to solve the questions along with you. And I give out a lot of important information with regard to UPSC Prelims 2020 also there. So they're very, very informative, very engaging classes. I've got excellent response for those classes, almost 100% ratings on that. And a lot of students regularly come to those classes. In fact, people wait for those classes. So it's an exciting time to be on Unacademy platform. I share all my links. Either you can follow me on Unacademy directly, type my name and follow me so that you get notifications for all the live classes. All these special classes are free for everyone to attend. Or you can join the Telegram group or channel so that you get updates on my IR classes and my Unacademy classes. Also use my code SBUS to get the subscription on Unacademy. It will give you an instant 10% discount, lowering your 1-year prices to less than 40,000 and your 2-year prices to less than 30,000. All right. And obviously there are no EMI installments available on our website. So no EMI installments. That means even if you don't want to do a direct down payment of 58,000 or 40,000 directly, you can take the EMIs. You don't have to pay any interest on our 6-month, 12-month and 24-month subscriptions. And obviously you have liked the video, so please subscribe to our channel UPSC CSE in English with Unacademy and hit the bell icon for more notifications from more videos from my side, and use my code SBUS to get an instant 10% discount on any Unacademy subscription for UPSC CSE category. So for any course under the UPSC CSE category, you can use my code SBUS. It is universally applicable and you will get an instant 10% discount. Use only this code SBUS for any course under the UPSC CSE category. We are running wonderful amount of courses on our UPSC CSE platform at Unacademy. So for any course, you can use this code. This code is not valid just for my courses, but for any course that you want to take an admission or subscription in, you can use the SBUS code or Siddhi Bangard at Unacademy Plus course. So you can use this code. With that, I'll close for today. And I hope there are no more doubts. Are there any? Okay, I'll explain that. I'll explain the last slide cartoon you want to go to, right? I'll just go to that. Okay. Srihari, this cartoon is similar. So China is coming in close proximity to Pakistan. So there is a love affair between China and Pakistan. So, but China does not like us engaging in a love affair with Myanmar, right? So they are actually pointing out to Modi. Chinese Xi Jinping is pointing out to Modi and saying that, look, don't go and engage with Myanmar. Okay, I do not like this. However, they are engaging with our own neighbor, Pakistan. In fact, there was a news in Hindu, which article was about maybe Myanmar is our Pakistan, right? So whatever the Western nations are doing with Pakistan, they are helping it. Despite reservations from India, we are also helping Myanmar despite reservations from our Western allies. And in a similar manner, despite our reservations, China is helping Pakistan. So in a similar vein, Myanmar becomes our Pakistan, and despite Chinese reservations, we are helping out Myanmar. So this cartoon is about that. Is that okay? Understood? Any more doubts? Or should we call it a day? Shivani, actually, see, non-aligned movement came back in 1955, right? At that point of time, it was the Cold War era. That's why I told you, Shivani, go and watch my first 2 and 3 lectures. I have discussed the Indian foreign policy in detail. How we have moved from non-alignment to energetic engagement. Now we are not non-aligned anymore. We are engaging with every other country, and there'll be a lot of contradictions. That's what the energetic engagement is about. So we'll be non-aligned as well as we'll have Western allies. So there'll be a lot of contradictions in the international relations. So that's the new norm, and that's what is called energetic engagement under Prime Minister Modi. So go and listen to my first, second and third lectures. They have talked in detail about foreign policy determinants and how our foreign policy has evolved in the 6 phases, from non-alignment to energetic engagement or to becoming a balance to China in the Asia Pacific region. All is covered there, and I've also covered in detail how each prime minister has impacted the foreign policy, right? Are you clear, Shivani? My request to all of you is that all your doubts will be clear if you go and watch the previous sessions. I will share the playlist today on the Telegram channel, the entire playlist of my IR sessions. All right. Today on the Telegram channel, so that you will have an access to the entire YouTube video series, and you can watch it one by one and watch it in a series so that you are able to understand in a better manner. That's why when I started this series, I told everybody that it will go in a chronological form. If you don't understand what has happened in the past, you will not understand what I'm talking about here, and everything has to tie back to the theory of how the foreign policy is determined and what are the factors that influence foreign policy. Yes? Okay guys, thank you. I'll end today's session here. It was nice having you all here. You were a wonderful audience, and it was extremely enjoyable to interact with.